Call the special meeting of the Grand Forks School Board to order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. This time we'll move on to our agenda. It's got one item, school district closure update. We have a second sheet that is in front of you that we'll be working off of. There's two items that we really want to visit and get everybody up to date. I guess 3 items, 4 items, I guess it is. So we'll do it first on the teaching part of it, and then compensation for classifieds, kind of ease some anxiety that's out there by them, and then child nutrition, and then building and grounds. So at this time, I'll turn it over to Dr. Brenner.
Thank you, Bill. First of all, thanks to all of you for coming in for this special meeting tonight. I know some of you were here last night for a policy review committee meeting, so thank you for your time. And for those who are in the audience, thank you for being here as well. I see you're spread out nicely out there, so thank you. The agenda you do have in front of you, and in just a minute I'm going to walk to the podium, so I'm going to put some slides up. And we're going to follow the format of talking about the timeline of our internal work so you can have an idea of what's been going on in terms of communications at central office and interfacing with local and state agencies. We'll talk a little bit about work schedules and the expectations coming from the governor's office. And then we'll have teaching and learning, compensation, child nutrition, buildings and grounds, and future board meeting format. We'll have that as a discussion item as well. So got a number of team leaders from Team Grand Forks here tonight, so everybody's going to take a bit of the process here this evening. So I'm going to walk to the podium right now and take you through some slides. I just want to take you through a timeline, excuse me, relative to when we started the conversation about COVID-19. This goes all the way back to January 29th, and Tracy Jentz, our communications coordinator, started to begin drafting documents in the event that we'd be dealing with COVID-19 here in Grand Forks and also in the state of North Dakota and its implications for our school district. On February 11th, we had more conversations at the cabinet level and talked about, again, district implications. And then there was, I don't want this to appear that there was a dead period between February 11th and March 5th. There were almost daily conversations going on as this was ramping up across the country. And we were taking our cues all along the way from public health, Deb Swanson from public health, the mayor, and also the Grand Forks County Health Officer, Dr. Joel Walls. We were interfacing with those folks because 2 out of the 3 have authority to make decisions about whether schools remain open or not. On March 5th, you can see there was an email communication regarding what was known at that time about COVID-19 and some of the precautionary measures, and that was sent out to district employees and all Grand Forks Public School families at 5 o'clock. And there was also a follow-up text message as well. On March 6th, you received a communication from me in Friday Focus regarding just letting you know that we were having those conversations and deliberations. And then everything pretty much ramped up like it has across the country as we get into March 10th, 11th, and 12th. Principals had meetings at all levels, elementary, middle, and high school. And those were led by Jody Thompson and Catherine Galach, talking about contingency plans for high rates of absenteeism, both from a student perspective and also from a staff perspective. We've been probably a little more concerned based on the scientific information coming to us, more concerned about our adults in the building than we were about students becoming sick. No offense to Oliver and Riley sitting here. You just might be carriers and we don't even know about it. So on March 12th, some of us in cabinet met with a person from UND to talk about their plans to see where they were going in terms of shutting down UND and what kinds of decisions they were going to be making, and some of the implications that that would have on us in terms of practicum students, UND student teachers. When they start closing down the university, we have a relationship with them, so we had to make a determination of how that was going to affect us. On March 12th, you can see an email communication was sent out canceling all district-sponsored out-of-state travel. We had a number of events lined up, and we put a hold on all of that through April 15th, and that still is the date that stands, and I would suspect that that will change as we move forward. And then as we got to last Friday, I had a 4 o'clock meeting with city officials downtown, and also on March 13th, you can see that Ms. Jentz sent out another email communication regarding spring break travel. While we don't have any jurisdiction telling our people where they can and cannot go, we certainly communicated with them the consequences or unintended consequences if they would return from a site that was considered a level 3 country or a level 3 something, and let them know that they needed to go to the North Dakota Department of Health, go into that portal and self-disclose that they had traveled to a certain destination. On March 15th, this moves us into this past Sunday. Cabinet met at 4 o'clock. We had a 2.5-hour meeting. We developed a plan. We created 3 communications. We all left my office at about 6:40, and as we were all leaving, somebody got a text message that the governor was going to speak at 7:30, and we listened to that, and we all did an about-face, and not only did Cabinet come back here Sunday evening, but most of our pre-K through 12 administrative team was here. So we had 40-plus people having a conference call with the governor at 8:15, and then we started some planning sessions at 8:30. And it became apparent that night that it was going to be important for us to bring all of our administrators out to MSCC on Monday to start planning for the framework relative to what Tuesday would look like when we would bring teachers back, all in preparation for what does distance education look like being delivered by Grand Forks Public Schools. So that was a good several work sessions yesterday in preparation for teachers coming in today. And I got a little bit ahead of myself, so I already talked about the last part on March 15th. Lots happened on Sunday and Monday, and also on March 15th, the second text box you see there, there was a communication that went out to all employees and families at about 8:15. That was also shared on social media, and Ms. Jentz had updated the websites with all of the communications that had gone out to date. And also on Sunday, there was a text message to all of the MSCC staff, and that was sent out at about 10 minutes to 10. And shortly thereafter, I asked Ms. Jentz to send out one final communication to some of our paraprofessionals on Sunday evening. So there's somebody who has been working 24/7. It's not the superintendent. Ms. Jentz gets all the credit for that. You can see some of the follow-up communications. Then we move into Monday the 16th. Another communication was sent out to parents at 7:15 in the morning, reminding them of no school based on the governor's decree, that we would be out of school this week, which really affected Monday and Tuesday for us because we were on spring break Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. And also, you can see, and I already discussed this, that our entire administrative team was out here working on the shell or the framework for how work would be done at the building level with teachers today. On March 16th in the morning, Gina Wheeler, who is our workforce safety coordinator, and Ms. Jentz and myself had a meeting with district and city officials. There were also some other school districts at that meeting talking about what they were going to do, what they weren't sure they were going to do. And what was nice about that was there was a lot of sharing around the table, and some good nuggets were picked up from each of the school districts that was really good, usable information. Also on March 16th, Ms. Jentz sent out a communication in the afternoon to teachers to let them know what the plan was for today. And I just want to disclose that this communication went out, and at about the same time, maybe shortly thereafter, President Trump was holding a press conference and talked about not having groups gathering, having groups of 10 or more gather in a single space. So there was a little bit of push and pull with what happened today, and I'll let my colleagues talk about what kind of work went on today and some of the social distancing that went on at the building level. More communications went out today as it relates to the sites that food could be picked up by families, food that would be lunch for today and breakfast for tomorrow, and I'll save the rest of that for Mrs. Carl, who is here this evening. And also on March 16th, there was a phone call, email to families from Ms. Jensen, Amy Barch, Chief Academic Officer, asking 3 questions of families to discover what kind of technology accessibility that people and devices that people had at home. And we'll give you more detail on that here shortly. Noon today, and these are going to be noon Zoom calls moving forward every day with the North Dakota Council of Educational Leaders Executive Director Amy Kopis. She will have updates for us as superintendents, and the update that we heard today was, and this was from the governor to Dr. Kopis to the rest of us, that the waiver was for students not to be in school. The waiver was not intended to be for teachers not in the workplace. That sounds a little bit harsh. That's not my intention. I just wanted to make that statement that that did come from the governor's office, that teachers were expected to be at work. What I didn't say was we allowed teachers to stay home yesterday to give them time to plan. Give them time to plan for their own families in preparation for today. For some that was workable, for some it probably wasn't enough time. So we'll continue to work through those child care situations that families have. And I already provided the clarification of, no, I didn't provide that yet. I just had sidebar conversations with some of you. Superintendent Baszler from the Department of Public Instruction clarified through Dr. Kopis that President Trump's statement was taken out of context, even though it's not listed that way in the script. But what he was referring to was when there are 10 new people together, that's when you put a cap on a smaller group. So that gave us a little bit of comfort today, as most of our teachers work together most of the time, with the exception of our large campuses when some people don't see each other for weeks at a time at Red River and sometimes at Central when you're dealing with first floor and fourth floor. So that's kind of the timeline to give you an idea of what's been going on in terms of planning and preparation. I do recognize that there's chatter on social media and wondering when the district is going to communicate or what's the district doing. Again, I just want to make it very clear that we're following the leads of the medical experts and the people in authority who have the right to influence decisions based on what we do here at the district level. And with that, I think the next part is Mr. Thompson.
Thank you, Dr. Brenner. I would refer board members to the TAN handout. We're just going to use this as a document just to guide our discussion and our summary of what's been going on over the last 48 hours or so. So if you go down to the teaching and learning part of that, we'll walk through each of these bullets and then at the end try to answer any questions you might have. So Dr. Brenner did a really nice job of talking about all the communication that's been happening both at the district level and at the campus level, so I'm not going to cover that. The next bullet talks about Mrs. Jentz created a question and answer document. So this is a Google Doc that's live for our administrators and our district level administration. And basically anybody can ask a question. So you ask a question, there's a box for a response, so we provide a response, and then there's a box for who is asking the question, and that's not to track who's asking the most questions. It's to track who do we follow up with in case there is a follow-up question. And as of an hour ago, we had 14 pages of questions, totaling 70 questions, and probably 80% of those had been answered already. So some of them are straightforward questions, some involve people with medical backgrounds and those types of things. So we're trying to answer those questions as quickly as they come in. Let's see, all buildings met with faculty today. Dr. Brenner mentioned that. Again, a unified message, and to begin some of the planning, how are we going to get our materials to students? How are we going to get their backpacks, their books, their laptops, their personal learning devices? Obviously, we don't want 300 kids coming into a building, so we've talked about staggering the times based on the alphabet or a number that might be assigned to those students or those families are going to pick up devices in some of our learning packets. So principals are good about working on those types of details. I think that's all I had, Catherine. Is that
Yep,
your
and
next?
then I would like to talk to you a little bit about the teacher's plan was. So as Dr. Brenner mentioned, we gave them Monday at home and gave some guidance on things we wanted them to just start thinking forward on. And I want to put a big asterisk in front of all this. We are, as Dr. Brenner mentioned, we are planning ahead for a future that we don't really know what to expect from. And we're following the guidance that's provided to us by the Department of Education. We just came from a conference call with the governor's office and the state superintendent talking about the notion of online learning, and it's not yet been defined for us, and yet we're planning ahead to apply for potentially a waiver that is going to be given guidance upon from the state's department, but they don't have their ducks in a row yet. That's very vague, I realize, but we're trying to plan the best we can for what we don't yet know is really the moral of that story. Regardless, teachers, when they came to the building today, got together in their grade level teams or their departments to start iterating out what our essential standards are for the remainder of the year, to start putting together pacing guides around those, so kind of the scope and sequence to make sure that we reach those essential standards and those essential learnings with students, and to really just start the brainstorming of what at-home learning could look like. That may or may not include technology. We recognize that in order for technology to be part of that, we have to make sure that there's equity and access. Amy Barch is going to talk a little bit about how we're reaching out to families to define gaps and how we might be able to fill those gaps around that. But online options were what were discussed today. We were looking at paper and pencil versions to augment those online experiences. One of the big things that we have to think through on is when we start the teaching and learning process, so when we start introducing new content and new standards, we have to ensure that there's equity for all students. That ranges from students on IEPs to students who have English language learner backgrounds, to students who may be homeless or in foster care, et cetera, all means all. And with that comes the complexity of teaching face-to-face. Can you imagine the complexity of trying to teach either virtually or through at-home mechanisms? So the really cool thing is that, according to the principals today, our teachers rolled up their sleeves and dove in and got to work and are really looking at creating engaging learning experiences. And that's a point of it. We don't want it to be rote memorization, low-level learning. We want it to be engaging. We want it to be relevant. And some of the campuses said that people were really excited about looking at this as an opportunity that we might be able to learn some new things that we could even implement to the classroom when things resume normalcy. Part of it is also how we would deliver counseling services, mental health supports when we're not face-to-face with people, and that kind of continues on to our chemical addiction counseling and our social workers and that sort of thing. So our ancillary staff that provide really important services for families. We're trying to figure out how to balance their safety, the safety of the families as far as trying to prevent the spread, but still allow them access to services. So all of that is quite complex, and we are thinking forward around these plans and just getting ready for whatever comes our way, because there's so much that we don't know. And we keep saying that, who knows, kids could show up on Monday. It's highly unlikely, or they could show up a week from Monday, depending on what the governor's office decides we'll be doing with schools and the board decides as well. Ms. Barch is going to take you through the rest of the teaching and learning component.
Okay. So Ms. Barch and I had worked together yesterday to create a survey for our families. So we wanted to make sure that we send an email and text notification first, that you're going to be getting in a phone call. It would also come in an email at a certain time. And these are what the questions are, and these are what the prompts are. So we asked a question about internet access at home, about devices at home, and how many devices they would need. And so right now, as of 4 o'clock, we had 3,214, and that's the number of parents that answered, but parents can have more than one student. We had about 105 that do not have internet at home, so we would need to explore options for them. We have a number of students that do not have devices, and so we're looking into that and kind of collating the data there. So the next step for us is, again, to collate the data. We asked everybody to try to take the survey by the end of tomorrow. And just so you all know, it's not a really pretty report that's going to come from this. There's a bit of triangulation that we have to do to match up the parent with the student, and so that's something that we'll be working on tonight.
I just wanted to share a few things that our instructional design coaches have been working on today. So we recognize that families at home are striving or looking for some resources from us. So what we did is we put together a 4-week plan of what we could put on our website for places for families to go for learning resources. So what you see here are the 4 weeks for elementary, and we'll launch those one at a time of each week should the need arise. And what we did is we vetted each of these resources to ensure that they were free and they were accessible for families using most devices. We tried to include some reading, some writing, but also some fun ones. So the first one you'll see is like an art and writing project for children. So we tried to make it fun and accessible for families at home. We did the same for our secondary families. So we tried to, again, vet resources that were free and accessible using most devices. So we could, again, if we had 4 weeks of no school, launch once per week to try to just support that at-home learning. We also knew that mindfulness would be something that some families would be looking for, so we wanted to connect them to sites like Go Noodle, where you can get out some of that extra energy, or some yoga channels, just some resources for families to use at home. Our coaches have also been busy assembling resources for teachers. Carla Hoven took the lead on this one. She looked at how we could look at online resources to support learning from afar, tools for teachers, tools for students. All of these are hyperlinks, so teachers can click on them and then see videos and how to execute them on their own or work in groups. Online lesson ideas and just tons of resources. Our elementary team worked on Seesaw. If someone had not used Seesaw in the past, where would they start? So they downloaded screencasts, webinars, videos to support that learning for our teachers to get that ready should we need to deploy it. And same for secondary teachers or upper elementary teachers who may be interested in using Google Classroom. These are resources that we could send out to teachers that they could access at home, how-to videos, so if they had to create distance learning from at home, they'd have those resources available. I just want to echo one thing that Ms. Glatch said, that right now, Superintendent Basler was clear on that we do not have the authority to provide distance or virtual learning. That would have to come from a governor's waiver. So we're just trying to be as proactive as we can, should that arise.
Carrie, would you like to talk about special education? Carrie Weipeter is our Assistant Director of Special Education. Our Executive Director is just...
All right.
We don't want to say sick. When she talks, she coughs.
All right, good evening. We have been in regular contact with North Dakota Department of Public Instruction, specifically the Special Education Department, and the Study Council of North Dakota Directors, sharing updates, receiving information. We got a packet late this afternoon. And so we've been trying to put that in teacher-friendly language. We put out an FAQ document late this afternoon for our teachers and shared that with our building level administrators as well as our district administrators out here. We've been in consultation with a special education attorney who works out of Minneapolis. She's put together some guidance specifically regarding federal law and IDA and what that might mean for us regarding school closures. So we're awaiting that document, and then we'll try and interpret that for teachers and get that out. Let's see, we have the FAQ document. We are continuing to update that as we get information. As information trickles into us, we're adding to that. There's lots of decisions to be made. Like Ms. Bart said, we are, trying to plan forward for distance learning. Also planning concurrently, should school reopen, what that would look like, because we have many medically fragile students, and we need to be cognizant of that and making contingent plans for those students as well. And also thinking outside the box. Our special education teachers today also worked on thinking through what could special education look like. Should we go to a distance education model? And so we have been working on that today and trying to be thinking forward. So some next steps, some parent communication. Now that we have communication today from our Department of Public Instruction, we can start putting together communication for our families so they understand what's going on and what precautions we're taking. Also with meetings, we will not be holding congregate meetings. We'll be looking to have meetings, if needed, via Zoom, via Skype, phone conference, things like that. So that's where we're at right now. We were kind of on hold for quite a while, and just late this afternoon, we started to get some more information in, so now that we can move forward with those things. All right, thank you.
If everybody's comfortable, we'll keep moving through our talking points, and then certainly we'll allow for lots of time for Q&A at the end. The next item on your talking point sheet is compensation, and you also have a handout at your workstation. It's a very skinny handout. The cover is the Classified Personnel Policy Manual. I gave you the cover and then just gave you pages 10 and 11 highlighted in yellow. Section 4 down on the bottom of page 10 talks about unscheduled school closing and delay, and this would have to do with compensating our hourly people, particularly our paraeducators, paraprofessionals who are 9 to 10 months and who work at the building level. So letter A says all employees that are normally scheduled to work on days that there is an unscheduled school closing will be paid their regular scheduled hours. And because we don't know how long this is going to go, you know, we certainly want to keep, it's our perspective that we want to keep people whole. And so we're certainly, let me reframe it this way. We are going to be asking paraprofessionals to join us back in the workplace on Monday unless we have to pivot based on what the governor might share with us at the end of the week. While we don't have students in school, there is plenty of extra support that paras could provide for us, working with teachers, helping deploy lunches, assisting with lesson plans, et cetera, et cetera. So for the days that we're off, I guess what I'm looking for from the board is some latitude that we pay our hourly people who are not working with kids. If they're at the building, if they're at the campus, they're working. But if there's another decree where we can no longer be in the buildings, we just want to be able to pay our people until a certain time. You know, one of the things that I put on the talking point sheet was, you know, pay them for sure through Friday, April 3rd. That gets us through all of our waiver days, storm waiver days, built-in time that we already have, and then make another decision moving forward. These are, as all of you know, they work in tough situations. They're not our highest paid people. Some of them live paycheck to paycheck, and this would be very difficult for them not to be paid. So I'm sharing that with you and hoping we have some support from the board to continue to pay our folks.
Do we want any questions on that part of it?
I agree. I mean,
think we all do.
it's one of the first things that I thought about, you know, as someone who's sort of paycheck to paycheck myself. And I thought, well, goodness, you know, I don't want this to roll. And we all appreciate and respect the work that they do all the time. And if it's not their choice not to be at work, I think we should definitely pay them.
This is the same philosophy we used after the flood. We followed the same format, and we did pay them. And that ended up paying them when school was canceled. I think we paid them for the whole year, through the whole year. So that would be something we would address in April. But I think we've set that precedence in the past to pay them for the year that they had anticipated working for us.
So does the same, I mean, paras, are they considered classified personnel, or are they separate?
Yeah, they're classified.
Okay. So they follow the same then if for some reason school is postponed until June and they wouldn't get paid in June then?
They wouldn't get paid in June?
If they worked in June. If they got paid between now and end of May and then school was in session in June. I mean, is that how I understand this?
Yeah, that's kind of the tricky part when we have some funny days, and Tracy Abentroth, feel free to come to the microphone. If we exceed some days where we don't have school and we don't pay them, and then we make up those days, they're paid on those make-up days. This is a little bit different because we're paying them up front, and then if the school year, for example, would be extended, I think your question is then we wouldn't pay them because we've already paid them.
I guess that's kind of the question. Is that what this is telling me? I mean, it says if school closing results in a makeup day being added, employees whose work schedule is based on days when school is in session will not be paid.
Yeah.
So I mean, that is
And
what's in here.
We'd probably want to come back and talk to you about that.
Okay.
Tracy, you have any?
No, I don't think so. But at this point, we're not required to make up days. I mean, this will be fluid. I mean, we'll be figuring this out. And I think, weren't we thinking just for this next time period to have some latitude to be able to go ahead and pay according to what the policy manual states?
And the governor has forgiven these days, but for us, because we're already on spring break, we get 2 paid days from the state, not 5 like some school districts. Scott, is there anything you'd like to add, not to put you on the spot?
No, not really. I mean, at this point, that it's within the budget. I think the concerns would certainly come into play if, depending on what the state does with the per pupil payment, if for some reason the education that we provided did not count as hours or seat time or whatnot, and we weren't compensated from that. That's 2/3 of our revenue is from the state. So that's really where we would have the significant concerns. And I think we really need to see how long this plays out is going to be another factor, for sure.
All right, Ms. Carl, ready to talk about child nutrition? And I just want to thank Emily for cutting her vacation short and making a long drive home from the North Shore all night to get here on Monday to get things in order for today. So thank you, Emily.
All right, so that being said, I'm still catching up on sleep. We did feed students today. We are operating currently under the Summer Food Service Program, so slightly different program than the National School Lunch Program. This program means that we have eligible sites to feed at, and then those sites are open to anybody 18 years of age and younger. So we served at 12 sites today, and it's easier to tell you which sites we did not serve at than which sites we did serve at. So we did not serve at Discovery, Lewis and Clark, South, Community, West, and Twining. So Community and West are actually area eligible sites, but because of the location, Community is close to Lake Agassiz, we could utilize that staff member at a different location, and then those students in that area had the opportunity to eat at Lake Agassiz if they so choose. And then with West being under construction, we don't have access to the kitchen there, we just chose to stay away, plus those students have access to Lake Agassiz, Valley, Winship, other schools in that area as well. There is a waiver currently in USDA to request that we can serve at all of our locations. So we're still waiting on potential approval there. And if we get approval, then of course we would expand our services, particularly to the south end of Grand Forks and Twining. Today we served 758 breakfasts and 788 lunches. We do have a plan in place for Mondays, whether we're operating under National School Lunch like we normally would be, or under the Summer Food Service Program like we did today. Since we weren't scheduled to be in session Wednesday through Friday of this week, we won't be able to do meals. I just frankly don't have the staff to do it the rest of this week. Any other questions?
Just, could you please repeat the schools that you weren't at?
Discovery, Lewis and Clark, South, Community, West, Twining.
And then also, could you please repeat how many lunches you served? You said 758 breakfasts?
And 788 lunches.
And what does that compare to? Just
it was a week ago. Oh, it's written over there. We did about 35% of what we normally feed for breakfast and about 15% of what we normally feed for lunch.
I know that the meals being provided are grab and go. Could you give us sort of a idea of what that includes?
Sure. So today we did a cold sandwich, which was either on bread, a bun, or a bagel, carrot sticks, either juice or whole fruit, and milk. And then breakfast was a breakfast bar, cheese stick, juice, and milk. And looking into next week, whether we're running National School Lunch or summer feeding, we'll be offering hot food next week.
Have you guys also discussed a plan for possible delivery for individuals who maybe can't access the sites, or a spouse has a vehicle or something like that?
Those conversations are in the works, since it's based on area eligibility. Unfortunately, we couldn't prepare meals at Kelly Elementary and deliver them down on the south end, things like that, just because of the area eligibility. We are talking about different options that we might have. I know we have access to vehicles and we have access to drivers. It's just kind of figuring out the logistics of how that might work.
Do children have to be present in order for a parent to pick up meals? That's a question that I've been getting.
The official answer is yes. My answer is if they are here requesting meals, we will serve them, and you can tell me that you have kids in the car that aren't feeling well, and I will say, okay.
So in terms of delivery, I know we have a Dietrich busing contract in place, and with not having school and perhaps not having school for the foreseeable future, how is that? Is that an option? Have we been communicating with Dietrich about their ability to help us run delivery? I mean, generally speaking, of anything that we need, if we need to get even curriculum out to students and deliver it to the houses, we have kind of a contract with buses that run the routes.
I was going to defer to you or Mr. Arnold, so.
Chris, would you have a Dietrich response to that?
So to that point, we have assets in hand to move that curriculum if need be, without knowing truly what the plan is for next week and how we're going to deliver that and how the teachers want to get that curriculum to them. We haven't gotten to that point, but we will consider that if it does come down to that. We do have that option. Now realize that the routes that we have with Dietrich are kind of defined by hours, and that's how we pay for them. So, the contract is just kind of a rate fare. It isn't necessarily that the bus is ours. Does that make sense? I don't know if I'm answering your question.
So do we pay, I can't remember, do we pay them monthly or do we pay them annually?
We pay them monthly.
Have we already paid for March?
No,
Or do
we
we
pay,
back
we
pay?
pay, we pay for what we have used.
Okay.
So each month there's routes as we, like, for example, the west route that we added to Serve Discovery. That will come on this upcoming bill. Correct, John? Correct. Wonderful.
Okay, so they're there as as a support asset if we need to tap
Yep,
them
and they've
for that.
offered their services.
Okay,
But when you say that we have resources in hand, you're also talking about district-owned Grand Forks Public School District vehicles,
Correct.
vans.
Emily has a
staff
fleet.
to-
We have a fleet of not only B&G vehicles, we also have vehicles that we loan out to other school entities to use, students or teachers to move students to whatever events they have. And then also Head Start has assets available. I'm trying to think who else would have some equipment laying around. But yeah, we do have quite a fleet of vehicles that we'll be able to use.
I don't know if anybody else saw, but there was a tweet or an email that came from a principal in Minnesota that really encapsulated what I thought. She talked about look at how much the school districts have taken over the care of our children. They're feeding our children, they're disciplining our children, they're doing mental health. And her point was, now it's time for the village to help out the schools. And I think this is a great time to think out of the box and think about, maybe not for delivering educational materials, but for delivering meals, talking to churches or other organizations that would be willing to step up and help. So I think this is a good time to talk out of the box, not us, but the people that are doing the jobs all the time, to look at, are there other ways to handle this? So.
And we've been working with Sue Schreck with the mission to help hand out the backpack program meals too. So she dropped a bunch of stuff off for us, and that was part of our distribution today.
Emily, could you maybe just, I don't know if everybody knows about the backpack meals, could maybe you just mention what it is and how many kids are served by it?
Yeah, I actually don't know the number of kids that are served by it, but it's very generally our free and reduced population receive food on Fridays to take home over the weekend, and it's all non-perishable stuff and kid-friendly stuff. I peeked in the bags today, and it was oatmeal, some Easy Mac, fruit snacks, so very kid-appropriate and stuff that they can use and possibly even make themselves.
I'm sure all of us have seen, I mean, there's a lot going on social media, but beyond what we're doing, I mean, to kind of talk about the village, one thing that immediately happened, I think even before, it was published in the Herald, is a lot of restaurants around town are offering free meals. So I think we have that, and it's just been commendable. That's been the one thing on my mind as a board member where I'm like, hey, the community's stepping up and feeding these families and these children that may not have a stable nutritional source through the next month, 2 months, whatever it's going to be. So what you guys are doing is great. And I mean, I know that there's some waiver of USDA restrictions on the program that's pending and should be finalized sometime soon. So have you looked at what those restriction waivers are? Is that dealing with some of the sources and the times that you're allowed to serve and those things? All of those requirements will be waived? Or I didn't dig into any of the real detail of it, but
The two that we're waiting to hear are if we can serve at currently non-eligible sites. So my concerned sites would be Discovery South and Twining. And then the other one is that we don't have to follow a meal pattern, so we can serve kind of whatever we have on hand, with the concern that deliveries may stop or slow down and we may run into food shortages. Those are not legitimate concerns at this point, but if we are in this for several months, it could be.
Thank you, Emily. Chris, we're going to move to buildings and grounds, so feel free to come to the mic.
All right, we're not going to talk about buildings right away, so we'll talk about custodians. I know there's been a lot of questions. In fact, I think even on the radio today there was some questions about what our buildings are doing to prepare for kids next week potentially. So currently the staffs at all the buildings utilize the 2 extra days this week because they would be on staff Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. They don't get those days off unless they take leave. But they are utilizing the additional 2 days to go through those schools and do further cleaning. What we are starting to notice is that certain things like peroxide wipes are now on back order because part of them are made in China. But we do have we should have enough paper products, we should have enough hand soap, all of the real main essentials to clean inside the classroom, the solution of peroxide that they dilute down to clean with rags, we have plenty of that on hand. So we should be good there. The only shortfall is that we're going to probably start to see where we can't restock. But we have enough likely to make it through till the end of the year. Any questions on that? Yes, ma'am.
So I know at my place of employment, they have ramped up cleaning in the last day, and cleaning things that don't ordinarily get cleaned. And right. I've heard from a number of parents from other states that are having to go gather things out of lockers because they anticipate schools are cleaning the lockers and sanitizing everything, anything that's touched, trying to clear anything out. Are we moving towards that direction? I mean, I heard
kind of people coming in to get their things and not having a wave come in. But is that the plan, is to, I think one of the first concerns is if, and I'll ask the question about why teachers are having to go to the school during this period. But if teachers are going into the schools, I think the first thing they're gonna wanna know is, have they been fully cleaned and sanitized up to a standard that they can feel comfortable that it's not living on a surface somewhere that they're unaware of?
Correct, yeah, so peroxide is a safer and actually a better alternative to our typical chlorine, solution that you would use at your house, like a bleach solution. But yeah, the custodians, where we are at right now, is they have wiped off surfaces, so the exterior of lockers, handles, Chromebooks, Chromebook shelves, things that we actually ask the teachers to go through and remove stuff off of desks so that they can safely clean all the surfaces there. So yes, the short answer is yes, these buildings are safe. They have been cleaned, and in fact, our cleaning staff has been cleaning long before this 5-day period nightly, and in fact, we had extended to them that they are able to work longer hours if needed, and many of them have had to use that just because of staffing shortfalls and different reasons, but yeah, the objective obviously is to make sure we clean everything. Now, going into lockers, I don't know what next week is. It's really tough to have everybody run in there to yank everything out of their lockers and then bring everything back. Just the timing has really not been conducive for us to plan for that. So if we continue to push further down the road, that likely will be where we'll head.
So I like the optimism of, maybe next week, but the pragmatism is, I don't know what silver bullet Grand Forks has that every other community in this country doesn't have, but I think when schools shut down, what we've seen over the last 3 weeks is they're not opening up even after a week or 2 weeks. And so just at a kind of a high level, I know day-to-day operational decisions are handled by the administration, but at a certain point, this isn't a day-to-day operational scenario. This is a novel scenario that we haven't faced, and is at a certain level, is there guidance and direction that needs to come from the board in terms of planning to say, here's what we think as a board we should give the guidance on. And I know we're battling with what this, Bismarck is telling us to do or not do, or the lack of information we have, but even the very basic of, should we be as a board, do we all agree that we should take a conservative approach to this, that we're probably not opening on Monday, and give that guidance to the superintendent and to the administration? I'm just wondering if have we crossed that threshold yet?
Well, I would just respectfully ask the board to allow administration to do the day-to-day operations. We brought something to you tonight about, compensation. We think you should be a part of that if we would want to extend that compensation. Certainly if we get to some kind of drastic measures, we're going to communicate with you. We're not, this isn't Pollyanna about next Monday. I mean, we can look at the glass half full. We're trying to keep our message on point. We're following the governor's directive. If he's saying schools open on Monday, schools open on Monday. If he doesn't, then we are over preparing. We are preparing for beyond next week. We're preparing 2 weeks, 3 weeks out. We talk about virtual learning and distance learning. That's not just a one-day concept or a one-week concept. That might be a finishing out the school year concept. And so it was really important for us to have our people in the building today to really begin that groundwork, so we are prepared. So we can wrap around support services with Amy Barch's instructional design coaches to support teachers who may not feel comfortable with technology and understand how to do a flipped classroom, how to use technology. The good news is majority of our teachers do know how to use technology, and I would imagine that Riley and Oliver might echo that thought. So that's kind of where we're at. We would hope that the board would entrust district administration to continue to plan, follow the lead of those who are making those real macro level decisions at the state level, and move forward.
I may be wrong, but I've been on board almost 20 years, and there was a very small window of which I had the authority to close schools, and that was when I was the city health officer. I don't think the board has the authority actually to close school. There's a limited number of people that can do that. It's the city health officer, it's the mayor, and then it gets to the state level. I might be wrong, but I don't think, we could make a motion or we could do a resolution, but I don't think we have the power to actually do that.
I think you're correct. I think it goes to the governor's level, and I think we're prudent at following what the governor will tell us on Friday. I think the chances of school opening Monday are very remote, on that area. But I think his main point on the conference call that I sat in with too is with the principals and the team was more or less getting data that he was looking for, but I think he needs the data to see if it will happen. So I think we wait and see what that decision is, and then we go from there.
So, forgive me, I think what I said got twisted into a conversation about whether we have the authority to close schools. That's not at all what I'm saying the threshold is. What I'm saying is things like, all right, in the event that we go to distance learning or virtual learning, and somebody's going to have to help me understand the not approved thing and why is it not approved, and I trust that we're already planning for it to be approved. But things like, okay, if and when we go, we need to have a unified approach, and we're all going to do it through Google Classroom, right? Across the buildings, from X level to Y level, because if these kids are at home doing it, the last thing we want is parents having to figure out Google Classroom, over here with one student and this with another student. Those types of directional things. Or I need to understand, I guess, a little more information from the administration as to why is the waiver limited to students but not to teachers, things like that. Or, hey, as a board, can we be included on some of these emails if we're not a parent of a student? Because I'm getting a ton of questions and I don't know what's being necessarily communicated out via email and text, because I'm not in the school district yet. And it's, it's hard because now I'm trying to text Dr. Brenner or other school board members to say, hey, do we have an answer for this? Can I direct them to who's the right person? And if these communications are going out and have that information, and I'm going to the district website and it's not always all up there, we're communicating individually. So those types of, I'm not suggesting closing, but that's what I'm curious about.
No, all of our family communications are on the website, and I would like to ask every board member, if you are getting those kinds of questions, have the families check their email, their text messages, their phone, their voicemail, send them to the website. It's on our district page. It's on all school pages. If they're employment related, please have them call Human Resources. But when we have different people giving different answers and getting different information from different people, this is what happens. We're getting silos of information. So we need our employees contacting Human Resources and our families going to the resources that are already posted.
I think, Tracy, though, we're asking just to put us on that email list. So
Yes, so all of the
general
family
email-
communications are all on the website.
Yeah, but when you send it out to the public.
I would
send it
defer to
all.
Dr. Brenner on that one.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to say too much or whatnot, but I'm doing the communications, I'm doing the website, I'm doing social media, and I'm crafting the message. There's only so much capacity I have. But if you are asking about what we're doing for families, just go onto the website.
Catherine, did you want to comment on, you look like you're.
Yep.
So can we be added to the list? I don't.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll do that.
That's okay, thank you.
Yep, and also on, if you're getting specific questions that, the board has always operated under the past practice that you can defer those back to the building administrators. Some of those questions that you don't know how to answer, they certainly armed to answer that. We don't want to put you pickle in the middle on some of that minutia. so don't be afraid to refer those on to the building level administrators. You've done that in the past, so don't be afraid of that in this time either. But to answer some of your questions, so as far as why we aren't yet approved for online learning, that is in direct relation to what's happening at the governor's level. Earlier this year, there was a bill that was brought forth to our local authorities about allowing for online learning during storm days so that school districts could get credit for that. And that was shot down because of concerns over equity and access. And so the governor's office right now is undergoing the process of doing their own research on how we can ensure that all districts who apply for online or virtual learning for an extended period of time would meet the criteria that would ensure that there's integrity of the teaching and learning process. So that's all, we are responding to what they are directing us to, so we don't have the ability yet to apply for the waiver, but we're putting all of the mechanisms in place to be able to do so. So the things that we've seen so far that are giving them cause for concern, we're already working on. We're working on identifying the gaps in families that might not have access to technology, for example. We're creating backup plans. We're creating differentiation plans. So all the things that that they've had put on pause or put this process on pause for, we're already planning around for when they open that up. And we anticipate that'll come pretty soon. So that's not necessarily something that we can control. We're just preparing for it. And then you asked a bunch of other questions, and as you're asking them, I'm sorry, I should have written them down, but we're planning for all of those contingencies as well at the building level, even down to the fact that we recognize right now that there are a lot of students who have their instruments and books and that sort of thing. They left them on campus because none of us expected to close schools this week. That came to us Sunday night. And right now our plan is, as of next Wednesday, we hope to start deploying materials out to families so that they can students can start to continue their learning, even if the governor declares schools closed. We don't want to backslide on our student learning. So we're prepared to feed families and students information so they can continue learning, continue practicing the concepts that are already ready for them, and then prepare for those new concepts afterwards when we have to ensure that that equity piece is in there. Buildings are making plans for distributing materials, and so it's everything from, you know, the example that came out of Red River, we number kids 1 through 1,000, and we have number 1 through 1,000, a pile ready for them in the gymnasium, that we know that when numbers 1 through 50 show up at this time, we can just hand them all of their stuff because we've grabbed it for them. We've cleaned out their lockers, their music areas, et cetera, for them, to allowing kids to come in small groups and go and visit their teachers really quickly, and the teachers hand them their materials on the spot. So buildings are putting together what we're calling materials distribution plans, and that really is widespread because we may be told that we can't allow anybody to access our buildings anymore for reasons that you described. So we're ready for that, and we're ready for kind of the current state of operations where we could let in small groups and not have them, you know, be socially close to one another, and all those contingencies. So we are working on those, working out those different scenarios at the building level and at the district level as well.
I think it was interesting, we went to a meeting on, yesterday, with the county. It was a county meeting and county emergency meeting, and I was there for the Park District. But all the superintendents from all the county schools were there, and they all had the same questions, and they're all doing the same thing. And they're all waiting for Bismarck to get the okay of when and why, what we're doing. I know Larimore is looking at planning ahead for 8 weeks. You know, that's what he's thinking. Another district is planning ahead for 4 weeks. You know, that's what they're thinking. So I think all those schools are kind of in a holding pattern right now. I think they all pretty much agreed that Monday is probably a no-go, you know, with school, that it would be too quick, but they're all waiting for those waivers to be given by the governor and our Department of Education. The other thing is a lot of them are doing a lot of different things. You know, some are going to go all paper, some are going to do electronic, and they all are in different situations depending on their school district.
So I just want to make sure I understand it. So if virtual learning is not something that is approved, backup is paper curriculum being handed out, and then is that considered, I mean, that's one of the big bucket questions is indications from the state, how flexible are they gonna be on meeting those benchmarks and milestones and requirements that they have set for us? And, you know, it sounds like virtual learning's an option of trying to get there, and then maybe they'll hold those requirements if they think it's equitable. Paper is an option as a backup.
Well, it's still all distance learning. So,
Yeah.
you know, basically how Century Code is written, it's kids in the seats. The good news is the governor has been pushing innovation for the last 3 years. And he has been trying to work with the legislature to loosen up some of the Century Code status. So he's looking for innovation. He's looking for schools to do things differently. He's looking for school districts to respond to Oliver and Riley in the way they want to learn rather than the way we deliver curriculum. So I'm overly optimistic that at the end of the day, those waivers are going to be accepted, and how we educate kids off campus will be accepted. And really the exciting part of all of this, whether nobody else is excited about this other than me, is this is a direction that we've wanted to move to, you know, a blended learning environment where some things are online, some classes are asynchronous, some are synchronous, some are face-to-face. We've been talking about academies at the high school level that create courses around similar content that would be a student's passion. We're going to get there much faster as a result of this pandemic. That's the exciting part. So you can take that home with you, and if you lose sleep positively over that, you can join me then.
And the last question I asked was this whole teachers in the workplace. I strictly have no idea.
That came from the governor.
So, so what's the rationale, or what's the distinction, I guess, between students in the seat versus teachers at the workplace?
He just wanted people in the workplace to prepare for what school is going to look like if we don't come back. And so we needed people on campus to do that kind of planning. That's pretty difficult to try to pull our people together and have a first meeting virtually to do that kind of planning. We wouldn't be nearly where we're at today as a result of that.
So is going forward, is it a mandate that the teachers have to be in school in the classroom physically going forward, or is it something that it'll loosen up after?
I don't want to project what the governor might say, but the expectation is our people come to work. And if people have extenuating circumstances like underlying health conditions, we want to provide some latitude where they can work remotely.
What about caregiving now that schools are closed? I mean, if there's individuals who don't have
that might be one
childcare.
of the extenuating circumstances.
Is that something that has been discussed with our district, just so our teachers and staff can plan for those types of expectations?
We haven't communicated that to teachers. We have more work to do on that. We just want to be consistent because what we will get into is people pitting people against people. Oh, you get to stay home and because of X, Y, or Z, and I don't, and we just want to make sure that's thought through very clearly.
So just so 7:30 p.m. on a Sunday was pretty tough for me because I'm sure as many individuals who have kids in daycare programs, mine's on UND campus, and UND announced their closure, but the daycare center wasn't going to close until the governor closed schools. Well, that happened. So at 7:30 p.m. on a Sunday, I'm scrambling to find daycare. Isn't a great position to be in. And is that something that, will we have a plan in place by the end of the week that we'll be able to communicate to teachers so that going into the weekend, if they need to make arrangements next week, that we could maybe be considerate of those types of circumstances? So if they have to file something with the office, HR to get approval or whatever it might be, they can do that before Monday.
Yes. That would be the simple answer. Yeah. One of the concepts that we've talked about is allowing people to use whatever kind of leave they have in their bank instead of trying to silo, this is your family illness, this is your personal leave, this is bereavement. We'll probably keep bereavement leave out of it, but giving people that latitude because that would give them more flexibility. If whatever those extenuating circumstances are, they could use that leave.
Just a couple quick comments about that. You meaning us as a district, are left to a decision that's going to be made in Bismarck. So it's possible the decision will be made Friday at 5 p.m. or Saturday or something. So it's not all in our control, and it probably won't be. And the other thing I just want to reemphasize is the decisions that the governor are making is he's a brilliant businessman, but he's not a physician, he's not a medical person, but he's getting lots of great advice from people. So I think if the pandemic got to the point where it was dangerous to have teachers in the schools, there's going to be medical people that are going to come to him and say, this is not a safe environment for teachers, or that's not enough social distancing, or we're not flattening the curve, as the big term is nowadays. So it's not going to be just a governor making those decisions. It's going to be a governor along with a lot of medical experts, not even just in North Dakota, but CDC, U of M, a lot of world experts. So.
Well, and just
Go ahead.
Back to Shannon's point, and that was a reason why we gave everybody Monday. We gave them paid leave, paid time off, so they could make arrangements for Tuesday. Was that too quick for some? It was, but did it help a lot of people? It did. So we're going to be sensitive to that.
Cynthia?
You're going to let me talk?
Yeah.
So I've been getting comments too, and we can't know the answers. So I just have to say to some people, I don't know the answer to that. The district is doing the best that they can. I mean, as a board member, I feel like that's an okay answer. When I can get an answer, then I provide that information. But I mean, there is so much unknown. We are all dealing with this, each one of us, everybody. And so how can Cynthia Schaab know the answer to some of these questions? So when I get a call or a text or an email, I just have been saying, we're doing the best that we can. I don't know the answer to that because I don't know the answer, And so I just lift that up to maybe help you because it sounds like you think that you need to have answers for everybody, and I have had to say, I'm sorry, I just don't know, but I know that the district is doing the best that they can.
I don't think I need to have answers. I'm asking the questions that I've been asked of me, and I don't know the answer, so I've said I'll ask the question at the table. I think that's a fair approach to take. We don't know what we don't know at this point in time, and I think that's absolutely a fair statement to say. And what I've said over and over is we're doing the best we can until we learn to do better, and then we're going to do better, right? And that's what a fluid scenario is. We're learning more and more every day about what is the best practice in this situation, and we're following suit. I think we have to recognize that goes all the way up the chain of command, even to Bismarck. They don't know what they don't know. Yeah. And people are wanting some certainty in an uncertain time. So I think it's appropriate to ask the questions, and we'll get answers that we can get. It's part of, I think, the transparency aspect that we've been going for around the table.
Dr. Wong?
It's pretty clear we don't want Mr. Arnold to talk, so I'm just going to delay it a little longer. I just want to tie what Cynthia said and what Tracy said. Cynthia, you're totally correct. When I was the president of Altru, the buck stopped with me. I mean, I had to have all the answers. But when I sit on the Board of Education for the Grand Forks Public School District, we're not an operations board. I can't and I shouldn't be able to explain what all the operations are. And that's where I think it gets back to if somebody's questioning me about operations or things like that, that's where it gets back to what Tracy was saying. I defer back to somebody within the school district who does that, because we're a policy-making group, we're a vision group, we're not a day-to-day operations group, and there's no way I can know the day-to-day operations here. And when people ask those questions, that's when I need to defer back to building principal, assistant superintendent, whatever. So I agree with you. Thank you.
I think one thing that came out clear is after the press conference, there was a conference call with all the superintendents and the governor, and I think it was made very clear by numerous superintendents that they needed more advance notice. They cannot get a notice on a Sunday night that, we're closing school in 12 hours, so, Jeff.
If we do get the green light to do distance learning, you said maybe Monday, we wouldn't be ready for it by Monday. Do we have an estimate to when that would be ready?
Cap or Joe?
If I can figure out how to turn this on. Optimistically, we're looking at starting, having platforms in place for the following Monday. That's a pretty aggressive timeline. Our colleagues around the state, when we have shared that, have said, are you kidding me? But like I said, we've laid the groundwork. We're trying to identify the gaps, and I feel like we're actually ahead of a lot of different places on the strategy and the approach that we're using to try to get things in place. And as I mentioned before, the energy at the building level and just the willingness to jump in and start thinking about what's possible gives me pause to think that could be a realistic timeline. But we may have to push that out because I'm a naive optimist and, think we can change the world in a day, but I know things like that can take time to do them well. And we don't want to launch something that is incomplete. We don't want to launch something that may be confusing to families. Shannon kind of alluded to the formats that we use. We want them to be familiar. We want it to be a fluid process so that we don't create additional anxiety on top of the anxiety that's already out there. So we'll slow the roll if we need to.
Any other questions? Jackie?
I have some wonderful teacher friends who've added me to like Facebook groups and things of that nature that, are kind of teachers trying to get a hold of how do we do this new distance thing? How do we accommodate different things? And some of the themes that came up that concern me are, like you said, families are going to be stressed. There's a learning curve. We have amazing teachers, amazing staff in Grand Forks School District, but not every child has a mom or dad or grandparent or guardian that will sit down and guide them and make sure they're doing their work. And so I have some concerns over how we're evaluating students that are self-teaching, even if we are able to do some kind of hybrid face-to-face kind of teaching pieces, still the products of that work, what they're being assessed on, are going to be very driven by kind of the environment they have at home. And so I'm sure teachers are thinking about that, but I just wanted to put it out there just so I can feel good that I put it out there.
No other questions? No?
I can be done, unless you guys have questions for me.
Okay.
I guess I do. And since I asked you that back there, I'm going to ask you again, so everybody else can hear it. I asked him about what's going to be going on with West Elementary or some of the other areas where there's wetness. Are we going to be able to continue to work on that? So I think it's only fair that you answer to everybody's study.
Yep, so right now, progress is continuing at West. That really didn't get impeded or really affected by this. Probably the biggest effect will have any kind of materials or supplies that we may need. We've started to have maybe some concerns of materials getting here. But otherwise, no, West is on track. All the temporary heat's in place. We've got our secondary test came back for air quality, which basically confirmed what we had and also identified some additional water that had entered the structure. Now, when we start talking about the other buildings, really no guidance has changed on any of them until we know more about when the kids will return. Our biggest concern right now, from my perspective planning, and I've voiced this to Scott and Terry, is this summer. And do we still keep construction projects on task because we don't know what this summer looks like? Do we allow construction work to start on June 1st, replacing skylights in Red Rivers Commons? Well, if we have school going on, that's likely not an option. Same with some other projects that we're doing, like the boiler replacement at Phoenix. That's actually in the middle of the second floor. So a lot of things we're wrestling with right now.
So this probably goes back to the curriculum discussion, but you just brought up a point. So in '97, I remember going back to May school. So is that part of the considerations is depending on whenever this thing quiets down, if it does, you know, let's say where it's May 15th, you know, do we have sort of a smaller extended, you know, end of the semester possibly? Is that part of the discussions that are happening as well?
Yes. We have some days to work with because of the length of our school day. So once we get past the governor's waiver, depending on, he might waive more days. So basically, we have about 16 days that are banked, so we could use those. It's never good just to say, well, we have them and we use them, and then kids just lost 16 days of learning. But if we get beyond that, then we would be talking about an extended school year, which has implications and ramifications for our summer school programs at the elementary and secondary level. So those are, thanks for your question, but those are decisions that will come and when we find out when we're back in session.
Okay, we're good.
Just looking at the students.
Oh, you have one?
June school.
I wasn't sure if you were here.
No, I have the utmost confidence in our district leadership and our district staff, and I think whatever comes of this, I'm sure Grand Forks School District will be at the forefront and probably an example for other districts. Just a food for thought, to maybe something for you people to think about in the back of your minds. I have 2 high schoolers that are sitting at home, and of course they can't really work because no one's really working anymore and all that stuff. So as you move forward and as things change, if there's opportunities for volunteerism, I know a lot of the honors programs and different things, they all have hours to get anyway, but if there's a need, if you guys find voids where you could use high school students, and I know there's probably legal ramifications or different things to work through and requirements, but if that's something moving forward, in the back of your mind, if you remember, oh wait, we could have some labor with this, or we could have some young minds for whatever it is, I think it'd be an opportunity to put a list out there and for high schoolers, maybe even junior hires, to be able to volunteer and get them out of my house for a while, help the district.
Daycare providers for healthcare workers.
Okay. Yep, go ahead.
There's just a couple of other things on the backside of your tan sheet. Under other, Mr. Berge is going to be tracking expenses that are related to all of this, in case we can recoup those somehow. And then the final bullet, I talked to Tom Weber today from SiteLogic, and we talked about the challenges with the March 26th meeting that's coming up next week with our facilities task force. He's going to send a communication out to the task force that meeting is taken off the table, but he's going to give the group some homework to do. He's basically going to flip the classroom. There were some videos that they were going to watch when they next got together, but they're going to watch those while they're away. And the plan is, at this point, that they would come back on April 9th and meet. And if there are more restrictions on group gatherings, then they're already working on virtual plans because they're working with several school districts on this very same issue. So we're not alone there. So April 9th would be the next meeting. Finally, March 30th, the city school board joint meeting has been postponed. We'll reschedule that when we can reschedule that when life returns to normal. And the final thing that I'd like to share is, and I put this on a video for teachers and principals this morning. You know, when we're in the midst of a crisis, in the line of work that we're in, there's no greater group, no more creative group than a group of teachers and educators. What they were able to pull off yesterday and then again today with teachers at the workplace is absolutely phenomenal. We're doing a lot of sharing with other districts, and we're really, given the situation, we're in a really, really good place. And the community is depending on us, and there's no other group I would rather work with than the group of people we have here in Grand Forks, from leaders to teachers to classified staff. This is a committed bunch, and I just want to thank all my colleagues for being here this evening, and for the teachers and all colleagues who are watching this, thank you very much.
Okay, the last thing, future board meeting.
Oh, there was one more thing.
I'm sorry.
Is there any way we could maybe get out a video announcement to all student emails? Because I particularly think about my high school age people, and not exactly practicing social distancing because they've got time off. And so they think, hey, I'll go to the movies, I'll go hang out with my friends, I'll go do all this other stuff, because we don't have school and we don't have homework right now. So I was thinking it might be a good idea just to have kind of a friendly, message from the district to students, directly to students, saying, you know, here's what we're doing. I know you're curious. We're always working on stuff, but as you're home, please think of these things to keep yourself safe. I think that would be really nice.
So I thought of this just at the tail end here when Dr. Brenner was talking. What about school library access? Because, so today, New American called me up, and he calls me regularly, and he just said he was home with his kids, kind of like what Matt said. And he said, we are going to do some reading, and we're going to do some physical activity outside. And so that's where we came in, because we're going to get him some more bikes. Unfortunately, his bikes were stolen. And so it made me think about reading. So one of the things, you know, and I know everybody knows this, 15, 20 minutes a day of reading for kids is a lot, and that's a really good thing. But the public library is closed, so, and we're delivering food. What about the library access? I mean, maybe you've thought about that, but it'd be something that doesn't require distance learning, but everybody could be encouraged to read 20 minutes, including high school students.
Yeah, we've talked about that. We haven't come to resolution. We're in constant contact with public health, and that's one of the questions we have with them, because it kind of gets back to the whole contamination thing. So we don't have an answer on that yet. We do know, however, that if not all, I want to say the vast majority, I want to say all of the language arts and reading teachers have in their plans to make sure that students have books in their hands, books that are part of their curriculum, books that may be part of their classroom sets and that sort of thing, so that there can be some reading materials there. And I don't know if, Melissa, if those conversations came up, but that was kind of our, when you think about first levels of easy, continuous learning, we think of reading right away, because it's the basis of all classes. So we are planning around that.
That's just another out-of-the-box, what can the community do for people who can't afford books? I mean, I can buy thousands of books for my grandkids, but there's families that can't afford one paperback. So that's, to me, that's another out-of-the-box, how can we get the community involved for those families that can't afford it?
The other piece of the connectivity, if we get everybody hooked up at home, is a pretty good percentage of our books at the library level are e-books as well. So they can tap into books that way. That's one option.
So just to piggyback, one of the things that I thought about was because we had that nice technology update, and that knowing that as a district we're device rich, I guess I'll say. Like I thought he mentioned almost 1-to-1, which is great. We had gotten to that goal. And then the next barrier being internet. And so I think it's great that Tracy and everybody's working on figuring out who doesn't have internet connectivity. I saw it come through that the FCC had put forth a pledge of nobody will have their internet service cut, one, but then providers such as Comcast and locally here Midco have the Lifeline program that's been in place for a long time. Now there is it's like a $5 cost per month for internet if you qualify for Lifeline, which is pretty much the same low income obligations that we already have in place. But I did call them today just to find out, Midco locally, what's the deal with that and how does that work. And it was really great to hear that they are mobilizing as quickly as they can to figure out how they can rapidly deploy if districts call on them. They've had questions from the Minnesota governor's office already about how to connect as many districts to Wi-Fi as quickly as possible. So I'll forward on those emails that I got today just from their communications team. The biggest hurdle that I saw was the paperwork behind it, but I think they're kind of following the same suit with the USDA waivers, trying to get that stuff waived too, it sounded like, but it's still sort of up in the air is what it sounded
Yeah,
like.
our technology department have reached out to those same entities, and, sorry, I'm talking overhead here, but they've recognized the same things. We are appreciative of those services being offered, but we figure that there would be a time lag in them actually being able to physically connect those services to households. So in addition to that, we're looking into price points on hotspots to be able to distribute to families as well, so that there's not a gap in the service. So that's what we're exploring right now.
I'll send you the emails because they had some commitments on turnaround time that were pretty
Awesome.
impressive. So
Thank you.
I'll send them to you.
I know this is talked about a little bit. I think one of my biggest fears from all of this is just the social isolation piece. You know, obviously social distancing is one thing, but with students who maybe are already struggling with some of those and now it's, you know, exacerbated. And so, do we have, are those conversations, I'm sure they are, but in terms of like the mental health matters piece and, you know, I know that there's some boundary things with, you know, like texting teachers and students, but, you know, not being in the classroom, those students might be most connected to their teacher. And, you know, so have we had those conversations with staff about like checking in with students and being a resource for them, you know, in a way that doesn't cross boundaries, but is appropriate given the times and you know, televisits or whatever that might be, or.
Yes. In fact, before I came in here, I was talking with Dr. Schleicher from South, and that was really a big part of their conversation today, is that we work so hard to make connections with kids and to build those relationships, that how can we maintain those relationships in an appropriate way, making sure we're not crossing boundaries during this time. So that's stuff that's being worked out and worked on as well.
We also received a communication from Mr. Jeff Gockler. He's our mental health coordinator, and he has been working on this today. And so he's working with the different entities with students who receive therapy services and how that's going to look moving forward. And then we're also looking into some HIPAA-compliant e-portal services that we could roll out for our students as well. So that's something that he's heading up and working on right now.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to future board meetings format.
Well, I was thinking about next Monday, depending on what the governor does, and if they create some more parameters for us, we might have to do something virtually, a Zoom meeting. We're trying to, you know, work through the School Board Association to talk about the appropriateness of that in terms of public access. I think as we went tonight, I can see this format still being used next Monday. We're scheduled to be at community high school, but this is probably a better place to be with all of our technology. So the plan would be, let's be here next Monday, but we may need to pivot if some other decisions are made. And if that's the case, we've got to make sure that public has access to our meetings, which is kind of an oxymoron because we're trying to limit the touches, but still follow the law. So more to come on that. Let's plan on being here. And then just full disclosure, the board packets were scheduled to go out tonight for next Monday. They will go out tomorrow, and we would ask for a 24-hour forgiveness from the board.
I would also just say, I think if the decision right now is to hold the meeting as it currently is, that board members can, you know, respectfully ask to be present via phone, and so make that decision for yourself. You know, it's nice to be in person, but ultimately you have to do what's best for you, so.
And please, if you're sick, do not come to the meeting in person.
I mean, that's what I get a little uncomfortable about. I'm not so much worried about me, but I'm in that age group that I may not be showing symptoms, and I'm sitting next to a guy who might be in that age group that might be higher risk. I mean, in all
No, I agree.
seriousness, I don't know if there is an option
That's why
where
we
we
got
can
to-
maybe explore something alternatively, because as much as like the group of 10 I don't see you all regularly enough, and I don't know who you may have contact with and who may be immunocompromised that you may come in contact with. And so I really do want to be in the barrier population, not a contaminator populant. So it's, you know, respectfully, if we can find something alternative, it is part of the reason I've been standing and kind of standing back is, I don't know, I come in contact with people at work who've been traveling to the coasts, and in the last 3 weeks, nobody's have anything, but.
I have no contact with sick people ever.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is a different thing,
No,
so
I agree.
respectfully, if we can.
Yep,
Yeah,
yep. We'll do it. Anything else?
perfect.
Need a motion on, yeah, no, because it's in there.
The question was, do we need to make a motion about the pay for classified staff? Right, that's the question?
We don't need
It's in a manual, I mean, it's part of our policy, so I think at this point, we wouldn't need
It
to.
was a courtesy for you and really asking for
Right.
permission.
Yeah. We probably can't anyway.
Who knows? Nothing else. Thank you all for coming.